The Super Nintendo was my first console. It shaped the way I think and feel about video games today, from its deep RPGs to lengthy action adventures. So needless to say that revisiting this platform and its games sent me on a field trip. What sets the SNES Classic apart from the NES Classic is inherent in what the platform offered in its era. Jumping from 8-bit to 16-bit opened the door for games to be much more expansive and nuanced. This is what propels the SNES Classic from simply being a novelty. First, let's look at what you get. The console itself, 2 controllers, a 5-foot HDMI cable, a 5-foot USB mini cable to power the system, a USB power brick, and a little treat, an old school folded poster. Not to mention the 21 games preloaded onto the system, all for $80. The SNES Classic looks identical to the original that released in North America, but much smaller and lighter. The power button functions just the same, and the reset switch brings you back to the main menu. It's actually the only way to get back to the home screen, and it's kind of annoying if your setup isn't within reach. Eject and the cartridge slot are just for show since there aren't any cartridges to insert. The front panel may look like the original controller ports, but it pops outward and stays attached. The controllers themselves are identical to the original SNES, and the buttons have the same solid tactile feel. The downside is that the D-pad feels a bit stiff compared to modern gamepads. One thing you don't have to worry about this time around is cord length. At about 5 feet, it's twice as long as the NES Classic controllers. At the back of the console, you'll find the mini USB port for power and HDMI out. This little thing doesn't need much power with its 5-volt spec, and can even be powered through a USB port built into TVs or a computer, saving you an outlet. The SNES Classic upscales games from their 240p resolution to 720p, a multiple of the original resolution. Native 1080p would have resulted in slight pixel distortion. Now let's fire this thing up. The system boots straight into the snappy main menu. Options are up top where you can customize the visuals. Want fake scanlines from the days of CRTs, traditional 4x3, or perfectly square pixels? It's up to you. And here you can choose the type of border you want to fill up your widescreen display, since all games run as they did back in the day. If you turn on My Gameplay demo, which uses your own gameplay footage, or Classic demo using built-in footage, Mario will walk by and hit a game block from the main menu if you leave your system idle for a minute. It'll start to roll gameplay footage in the background. It's cute, just like the lovely menu music. The suspended point system returns from the NES Classic. You can stop and resume a game at any point. The tricky part is, games with internal saves can have the data point overwritten if you enter an earlier suspend point. Now the reason why you'd want an SNES Classic is to revisit the greatest hits from Nintendo's 16-bit library, or experience what you might have missed, all in one package. Not to disparage the 8-bit era, but what separates the SNES from the NES is that the extra power afforded developers the opportunity to create greater games. More expressive visuals for stronger characterizations in game worlds, deeper stories, longer adventures, and more nuanced mechanics, and some of the best soundtracks in all of gaming. I genuinely enjoyed pouring hours into Super Mario RPG again. From its unforgettable songs to unprecedented story beats in the Mario universe, it's truly unique. In what other game will you have Bowser, Peach, and Mario fighting alongside each other? It was an achievement in world building and ushering in a new wave of RPG fans. Final Fantasy III, or better known as Final Fantasy VI, opened a massive world to us with 40+ hours of role-playing, giving you every reason to gather party members, learn their roles and abilities, and take down Kefka and his evil empire. Movement's a bit slow and random encounters are dated, but unraveling Terra's story and all of its branches still has a place in 2017. Another tremendous RPG in Secret of Mana deserves a full playthrough. I want to get 100% in Super Metroid, a sterling example of the Metroidvania genre we still see today. We even get a real release of Star Fox 2, and while it's a game that hasn't aged well, it's neat that the SNES Classic offers something exclusive. I haven't even mentioned Super Mario World, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, or Earthbound. Many of these games are realizations of ideas set in motion from the NES era and transcend their hardware limitations of their time. Speaking of hardware, the emulation delivers an authentic SNES experience. I spent time with all 21 titles to get a feel for how they ran. By and large, the games look true to form and run exactly as you would expect, for better and worse, which also means a few games suffer from frame rate drops. Street Fighter II Turbo had some slowdown with characters pulling off flashy attacks. Mega Man X did as well. So the system is mimicking the performance of the real hardware, adhering frame rate to the original cycles of these games. It's not game-breaking, but it is noticeable and undermined a few moments. The SNES Classic is a closed system. What you see is what you get, barring a hypothetical firmware update or expansion. And would it have been nice to see Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy II or Final Fantasy IV? Sure, but that doesn't negate the fact that we still have an all-star roster. Yes, I'm aware that there are so many ways to play these games, and we've had several versions of them through the years, but to have this lineup of iconic games in one place in an easy, accessible, and convenient fashion makes the SNES Classic worth seeking out. If Nintendo's looking to capitalize on 16-bit nostalgia, I'd say they did a damn fine job.